Traveler-chan! Traveler-chan! A familiar timbre called, or more like sang, your name. You heard light footsteps pattering around the courtyard and knew your quiet solitude was not long for this world. You let out a tiny sigh of acceptance and then realized your instant mistake. Considering how adept that boy's hearing was, you might as well have screamed out your position. Traveler-chan? It was mere seconds before his blonde mop of hair popped out from around the corner. There you are! His face lit up with a blithe smile and you politely returned it. Hi, Zenitsu. Lovely day, isn't it? Mm-hmm. He approached with a bounce in his step and knelt by your side at the edge of the wash basin. But not nearly as lovely as the flower in this garden. You eyed your surroundings for a moment in confusion. This side of the wisteria estate surely housed too much shade to allow for natural growth. You were quite literally kneeling on a mix of patchy grass and dirt. It was then you caught him grinning directly at you and you couldn't help but chuckle. Not at the cleverness of his flirting, but at just how proud he looked for coming up with that line. He seemed encouraged by your reaction and found the nerve to speak again. So what are you doing hiding all the way out here? Oh, I'm not hiding. Just doing laundry. His lips curled into a tiny pout. It's not fitting for a lady to exert herself. He scuttled forward until he was almost shoulder to shoulder with you and rolled up his sleeves. May I? Well, I insist. Sure. You chewed your bottom lip as he grabbed the washboard and dunked his arms into the soapy water. Now you immediately regretted throwing your delicates in amongst the kimonos with reckless abandon this morning. I think a good husband would never let his wife do all the chores by herself. He said it in a chipper sort of way, almost as if he found these mundane activities pleasant, therapeutic. You cast him a sidelong glance. There it was again. Zenitsu easily talked about marriage 10 times as frequently as any young man his age you'd ever met. If there was a record, he surely would have beaten it by now. It was curious, to say the least, and you'd wager commitment was the only thing this boy wasn't afraid of. However, you'd caught on to the nuance in his tone as of late. These situations no longer felt forward to you anymore, and you found yourself minding them less and less as time passed. Something about his demeanor didn't make you feel stifled as it had at first. There was nothing predatory about these conversations. No suggestive eyebrow jerk, no elbow nudge and a wink. Zenitsu wasn't trying to box you in, trap you in an eternal game of cat and mouse. He was just a boy sharing his dreams with you. All he wanted was a simple life, to feel loved by someone, and in return he vowed to dote on that someone like crazy. Zenitsu had always been very open about that dream, and it was easy to see why now, why he behaved the way he did. He craved little moments like these, ones that paralleled his fantasy, where he could imagine settling down and starting the family he never had. It was the missing piece of him, the void he longed to fill, and the exact reason he got into the bad habit of violently shoving people into it, anyone he thought might fit. You had felt a hard pang of guilt the day that this epiphany came to you, and as retribution started treating him with the kindness he deserved in the first place. Besides, what harm could it do to play house with him sometimes? It's not as if his presence was any kind of great burden to you. To the contrary, if you were being brutally honest with yourself, you had to admit you'd grown to like the attention. The companionship and routine of it all seemed to calm him, even bring a golden twinkle back to his recurrently tearful eyes. You found yourself coaxing it nowadays, that little twinkle, even expending effort to bring it to the surface. You didn't know why. You just liked seeing it? Tanjiro tried to run interference between you two when he could, constantly accusing him of layering things on too thick, but more often than not you had to disagree. While yes, Zenitsu's voice held a potent endearment more sticky sweet than the koromitsu you pour on wagashi, in your experience he was rather shy in his courtship methods. He would follow you around and smile, but he rarely dug up the valor necessary to initiate conversations with you. When the group first arrived here, he offered you a beautiful forest flower in the most darling way possible, then giggled and ran away after you accepted it. Based on how bashful his reaction was, you feared that you had inadvertently accepted a marriage proposal or something. But it was nothing like that. Zenitsu hid no ulterior motives behind that act. He just wanted to give you something pretty. The poor thing even got poison ivy trying to pick it for you. According to a cackling Inosuke, the blonde had skipped into the woods barefoot in his pajamas humming a love song, so it was his own damn fault. After all that trouble, you would have at least allowed him to place it in your hair himself, but he didn't even think to ask for that honor. You felt your affection grow along your smile as that scene danced before your lashes. That's chivalrous of you. You gave a response to his offer, and also to the memory. You think so? He locked eyes with you as if waiting for some sort of punchline. I do. When his sharp ears heard no trace of deceit in your voice, he blushed down at the tepid water. Your brows furrowed gently at his expression. You thought those words would have made him smile for sure. Well, you'd be the first then. A certain sadness seemed to tighten in his throat, and it felt as though a veil of gloom had suddenly tainted the sunny outdoors. A somber silence filled the air for a moment before you passed him the outermost layer of your kimono. Beneath the water, your fingers brushed his in the process, and you instinctively yanked your hand back. Sorry. He turned his face away, but it didn't hide the hurt evident in his features. Oh, no, it's not that. You frowned regretfully. Zenitsu cleared his throat and nodded in understanding as you returned your hands to the basin. You know, Zenitsu, you smiled and waited until his gaze returned to you. I think you'll make a wife really happy someday. Finally, the sheepish smile made its appearance, and the blonde felt an intense warmth fill his heart before. Ah! You shrieked and ripped yourself away from the sudden pain. In the process, you stumbled backwards and kicked the wooden basin, causing a substantial amount of water to slosh out of it. Oh no, not again! Zenitsu called out in despair before rushing to your side. Are you okay? He fussed as you opened and closed your hands a few times, trying to relax the tense spasm he had inflicted on your muscles. Yikes. That was a bad one, you admitted with a wince, which you regretted as soon as you saw apologetic tears form in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Traveler-chan. I really am. He shakily reached out to examine the injury, but stopped just short, afraid that touching you would result in another shock. For a moment he just hovered there looking like a lost puppy. I'll do the rest. Instead he decided to try and make up for it, returning to the laundry. Your hands must hurt too much now, right? It's the least I can do. Without missing a beat, the stuttering blonde lifted out one of the undergarments you had strategically tried to hide from him earlier, and your mouth fell open. It took a few seconds for him to process what he was looking at, before the color filled up his face. Ah! He dropped it immediately, and the fabric made a loud plap on the water's surface. I'm sorry! You didn't even have the chance to feel embarrassed before the young man fled the scene. He must have known there was no way to make a comeback after that humiliating mistake. From across the courtyard, you heard his tenor voice ring out, I'm a disgrace! Ah! You flopped onto your back with a deep sigh, still reeling from that encounter. It was painful in your hands, and also whatever area in the body that shame comes from. But somehow you found yourself wanting to smile. Not more than a few minutes passed before Tanjiro's emerald and black Haori caught your eye. You sat back up and greeted him, noticing the gauze and bandages he was carrying in his hands. Hey, traveler. He eyed you up and down, obviously assessing you for collateral damage. Zenitsu told me to bring you these. He knelt and held them out to you. He was beside himself. Is everything okay? You took one look at Tanjiro, then at the clothes still hanging haphazardly from the wash basin, and it was now that the humor finally caught up with you, and you found yourself giggling uncontrollably.